Boom, I'm in the room. Good evening, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're watching from. Now, you're here because there's nothing on the telly, and I'm coming to you from the old Heale Manor, and I'm your host, Lord Heale. Now, you know what this channel's all about? It's all about mental health, mental well-being, and taking the stigma out of it, letting people know that it's okay to talk about it. So, I'm always looking for guests to come on the show. Well, I've got a guest tonight. And this guy, he's a genius. He has set up a race team, True Heroes Racing. So, without further ado, let's get him in and we'll start a conversation. Phil, welcome.
Thanks, Tim.
Phil, now you're a Matlow and you are still serving and you've found a time to set up a racing team. Not with just one bike, but 3 bikes. Amazing. And it's all about helping guys. Now, can you tell us a little bit more about A, how you set it up, and B, what's your ethos behind it? And then we'll come back in and we'll have a bit of a chat about it. So the floor is yours.
Thanks, Tim. As you said, serving Matlow, 31 years, serving Queen and King now. And my trade in the Royal Navy is an aircraft engineer. So I was a member of the Fleet Air Arm and primarily spent my career working on Harrier jump jets, first the Sea Harrier fighter variant that the Royal Navy had, and then in later years up until the SDSR in 2010, the ground support aircraft that we worked hand in glove with the RAF on. Working on those took me to Afghanistan, several tours of duty out there, providing close air support for the troops that were on the ground. And like many service people that came back from Afghanistan and Iraq in one piece, in a fortunate position, wanted to do something to help those who were less fortunate from those tours. And back in 2009, started raising money for military charities that existed back then. 2010 was the first sort of big event, and alongside some other engineers from the Harrier Force that I served with, we took part in a round Britain motorcycle ride, raising money for Help Heroes. And we rode the circumference of the UK, not the classic Land's End John O'Groats route, rode the circumference, taking in a number of military bases and venues and historic sites. And in that 14 days, we raised over £15,000. But the important element from that was the support we received, which came from Triumph UK, who provided the motorbikes, and Nissan UK, who provided the support vehicles. Those two organisations linked us in to the British Superbike Championships. Nissan in particular, who were the support vehicle supplier to the championship at the time, and their finance director was an ex-army major who'd signed off on the support request, and he basically gave us the trade pitch that Nissan had as part of their agreement with BSB for the whole of the 2011 season, and said use that to provide an opportunity to raise awareness and funds for military charities. Nissan provided a lovely support vehicle, one of the Skyline GTRs that they put on the stand every weekend for us to attract the people on, and that's exactly what we did in 2011. Spent the season at the British Superbike events alongside military charities, raising funds for those particular charities. What that got me into was the inner workings of the British Superbike paddock, and in particular the hospitality space, which through the Honda UK team at the time, whose hospitality unit was run by an ex-Army One Officer caterer, Ian Addison, we started organising hospitality days for injured service people alongside the charities raising funds, and started getting the guys from Headley Court out for the day and getting a VIP experience of being at the Superbike Championships and stuff, just to get them out for the facility and just give them a good time. And one day I just went, why are we just sat on the sidelines enjoying viewing the sport? Why are we not actually taking part in the sport? So the concept was starting to roll around in my head about forming a race team And then one day I got asked to organise a hospitality day for a young lad from 2RTR who'd lost both legs in an IED. He came along. He was a mad keen motorcyclist. Had been told by the surgeon that amputated his legs that motorcycling was no longer a hobby for him. That was a red rag to a bull, as you can imagine, to a squaddy. And he was learning to ride again post injury. And I just said to him, why don't we go to the track? And that was the concept for True Heroes Racing. You can't have a race team without a rider, and Murray was that rider. There were other injured service personnel that formed the support crew around myself, and that was that. And in 2012, we challenged the system and got Murray his ACU approved race license, and took to the track in his very first race meeting at Castle Combe on 1st September 2012. Racing wasn't the big challenge we wanted. It was being in the British Superbike Championship. So to get into that championship, Murray had to achieve a number of different milestones. First one was losing his novice race bib. Second one was upgrading his license to clubman, and the third one was meeting the minimum speed requirement and pace requirement under assessment to be able to compete in the British Superbike Championships. And every challenge that was put in front of him and the team was achieved. And in April 2013, we moved into the British Superbike Championships in a class called the Triumph Triple Challenge. And Murray became the first disabled rider to compete at the British Superbike Championships. And True Heroes Racing became the first all-military team to be competing at the British Superbike Championships.
Wow. That's quite a little journey you've come there. And especially for Murray. I mean, riding a motorbike is one thing, but riding a motorbike without legs presents itself with a better challenge. And then to race. So I'm assuming that he's got prosthetics that he can sort of put down and hold the bike up.
Yeah, so Murray rode with both prosthetic legs, and as a biker yourself, you'll know that all four of your limbs provide controlling elements to the motorcycle, whether that's
Yeah,
controlling the gear change, the brakes, or controlling the actual movement of the bike. So adapting the bike to deal with the physical controls issues was relatively simple.
yeah,
Well, I say simple. It caused us a few headaches along the way, but it's a thumb brake for operating the rear brake that your right leg would normally do is a
yeah,
standard modification, and to replace the gear change mechanism that your left leg would normally do, we used a system called a Clicktronic, which is an electromagnetic piston that has buttons on the handlebar for up or down change, and then that electromagnetic piston does a push or pull movement into the gearbox like you would normally do through the lever mechanism operated by your foot. Those were the simpler elements. The challenge came. Murray had to learn a new riding style because with his prosthetics, his ankles were fixed, so he didn't have that movement on a bike, and also unable to apply large loads of pressure down through the foot pegs to change the direction of the transition of the bike from left to right. So for him, it became a real upper body riding style. He had to physically muscle the bike across from left to right.
yeah,
Great on fast flowing corners, but a real challenge on the slower, quick transition corners. So corners like the bottom of the mountain at Cadwell, where you're going to flick left, right, and then up and over the hill. A real
yeah,
challenge to get that direction change, in quick transition. And then additionally, not being able to apply the pressure down onto the foot pegs, and being a double amputee, we struggled with actually keeping his feet on the pegs. Now, obviously, you need to be able to take the weight of the bike on the grid. So we had stud mechanisms, literally bolts that came through the foot pegs and holes in his boots, to locate his feet. And we had a number of different mechanisms that we tried, all sorts of different things. And people would try and suggest how to achieve it. Why don't you use bicycle clips? The problem is when you try and rotate your feet, you're unclipping from them, and and different things like
Yeah.
that. But at the same time, you need to be able to detach from the bike should you end up in the gravel trap. You don't want to be stuck to the bike and the bike starts rolling with you attached to it. So we needed a sort of quick release mechanism, but at the same time, something you could pivot on, and something that you could locate easily when you lifted your foot off the peg, off the ground onto the peg. So those sort of stud concept became the basic sort of concept we work with. It became a challenge, and it wasn't perfect, but it was functional, and it achieved the aim, which was allowing Murray to be able to be on track racing.
So, from the racing point of view, how well has he done? Because he's come through the early system to be able to get his license to be able to race at BSB level. So he's obviously quick enough from that point of view. So how's he actually done over the last few years in competition? Or is it just
So yeah,
about taking part?
it was about being out on track initially, and there's no disputing we probably entered the British Superbike Championships too quickly, but it was about achieving the aim, which was to get out there. Many riders from a club scene never make it into the BSB for a variety of reasons, whether that's pace or funding, etc., etc. But for us, it was about being in front of the widest audience possible to prove just what was possible post-injury, whether that was Murray riding the bike or other individuals with both physical and mental health issues from the conflict, working on the bike and providing support elements to it. Because everyone looks at motorsport and it's all about whether it's the driver in the car or the rider in the bike, but there's a whole support crew that go out to getting that individual out on track in the first place. And mainstream teams, it's very little talked about and very little focus on that support crew. Whereas for us, it's all about the whole team. We call the riders facilitators. They facilitate what the organisation is able to achieve, the opportunities it's able to offer to the beneficiaries across the whole spectrum. So it's not all about the rider. Clearly, there is a huge amount of focus on the rider, and there was back in 2013 when Murray first took to the track at that level. The media attention and the public attention was immense. But that was
Yeah.
part of what we were there to achieve, which was to show to that wider audience just what was possible. Post Afghanistan and Iraq, there's been a whole plethora of projects, amazing things that some of these guys and girls have gone on to do. And True Heroes Racing and motorcycle racing is just one of those. Thankfully, we've had longevity. As I said, we started in 2012. 12 years later, we're still going, as you alluded to earlier, growing. Back in 2012, we started with just that single bike with Murray. Now we're running, 3 bikes this year at BSB. We ran 5 bikes a couple of years ago. But also we've got a grassroots program and a pathway program that we run at club level. And this weekend, just gone at Castle Combe, we had 11 bikes out at Castle Combe on top of our BSB bike. So there's a whole spectrum of stuff that we've got going on. And that's what it's all about for me. It's about trying to continue to grow and offer more and more opportunities. For every bike that we put out on track, there's 3 or 4 opportunities in the supporting elements for that. And whether that's with what we do at BSB in particular, which obviously, like I said earlier, is our kind of front of house. We have a whole support crew there that's bigger than you would do just for racing. So whether that's John, for instance, who's our Falklands veteran, with some serious challenges of his own. John just likes being at the racing. He's not interested in working on the bikes or being a rider. He just wants to be there with the lads, and he's happy to potter around, make tea for the lads, make sure everyone's happy, wash up the plates after dinner, and this kind of stuff. John's just there. He's with us, and he'd rather be doing that than being sat at home watching it on the telly. So it's from that extreme right the way through to the riders on the bikes, the mechanics working on the bikes, the whole spectrum, and that's the aspiration that I have, is to be able to create a motorsport organisation that is able to offer opportunities for veterans and wounded service people in all aspects of motorsport, from the guys driving the trucks to, as I say, the people involved in the hospitality and looking after our sponsors and guests, to the mechanics, to the riders, even to photography, and all of these elements that come together to form a motorsport organisation.
So on a typical weekend, say like the weekend has just gone by at Brands, how many people did you have supporting the team, or the whole team? How many people were actually
For
there
the
on the team helping?
So for that weekend at Brands that you and the guys from the Riders Club came down to, we had around about 25 people involved in the organisation that weekend, from the BSB perspective, from supporting that output of 3 bikes at that level, from myself down right the way down to the bottom. So yeah, like we say, there's people involved in actually riding the bikes, spannering on the bikes, preparing and helping out in support elements, supporting our guests, looking after them, catering, all of that kind of whole spectrum of activities.
Wow, I mean that's probably a lot more than most of the other teams across the grid.
Yeah, outside of the full superbike teams at the top level, yeah, most of the teams are run on sort of 2 people, 3 people per bike. We do that. You saw our setup yourself. It's probably the biggest setup in the paddock outside of the superbikes themselves.
Yeah.
And there's a classic element of military bravado. Bullshit baffles brains. That it's about the impression you set, and we've always had a very professional setup, and that takes time to build that setup and run that setup. So the facility we have. So I'm still continuing that element of what I did back in 2011, 2012 with respect to the hospitality element. So we offer the opportunity for veteran organisations to come and be guests at BSB as well. So as we were saying a little while ago at Brands Hatch, we were involved in a visit for a couple of the Chelsea pensioners, which was great from our perspective to link them up, get them out of the hospital for the day, but to be able to host them. Those individuals have, rightly so, a level of recompense related to them. They're awesome guys. They really are. 84-year-old guy, absolutely mad, keen motorcyclist, loving every minute of being in the British Superbike paddock. OMG Racing, their team owner Alan Gardner, actually got them to go up on the podium and take the team trophy for Ryan Vickers' win of the Superbike race.
Wow.
They were on the grid and handed Ryan Vickers his pole position watch. The organisation and the whole paddock called together to support what was going on that day.
And talking of the support, I mean, from the other teams across the grid, how well do they look after you? How do they interact with you? How do they view you as a team
Um,
of particularly sort of amateurs, really?
yeah, so the BSB at the top level, at the superbike class, is where the professional teams are. These are organisations spending £750,000 a year to field a bike and um, really run factory teams, Honda, the factory teams, Yamaha
Yeah.
supported teams, and the OMG, etc. So at that level, interaction is good. I know a number of the team owners, and some of them have military links. So Alan Gardner from OMG, who we mentioned earlier, is ex-guards officer himself from a few years ago, and obviously they view what we're doing in a very different light to the other teams in the paddock. Yes, we're there to race. We're not there to make up the numbers, but we are there for a wider mission, I suppose, in comparison to, like I was saying earlier. It's not all about the rider. We're not there to create career paths for young riders. We're there to use the sport for a very different reason, but we are still sportsmen, sportswomen involved in a sport.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of support for what we do in the bigger picture, but ultimately we are still competitors against other people on the race.
Yeah.
But you know, it is more friendly than people think at the support class level. So we've always been approachable. People from day one were interested in what we did, whether that was the general public coming to view the racing or other teams that we were competing against. It was unheard of. We broke new ground back in 2013 when Murray got into racing, but not just Murray. It was the support crew as well. Motorsport is very different in some respects and has moved on very much in the last 10 years. The access for disabled facilities for the public is clearly, it's legislative requirement.
Yeah.
You can't discriminate in respect to that. But from a competitor perspective, it's not normally seen in that light. It's seen in very much in an able-bodied space. So to bring people with disabilities, both physical and mental, into the paddock, it was one thing. But the physical side of things brought certain challenges to the competitors' facilities. And we've worked quite closely with the organisers and the circuit managers over the years to look at where improvements could be made. We've been referred to as the sort of subject matter experts in this field with respect to the disability support and inclusion space within motorsport, certainly in the bike racing fraternity. We brought the first assistance dog into the paddock. One of our mechanics had a PTSD assistance dog. Support dogs are permitted in the public areas, but in the racing areas, that was unheard of. Now, clearly, there's a particular reason that he has that dog, and that dog has a particular period where it's there to support him, primarily in his sleeping. So it's not like he's a sight dog or he's walking around with it and needs it, 24/7. The dog provides him certain aspects of support when he's sleeping and in that sort of night terror space.
Yeah.
So there were restrictions that we had to abide with. You can't have a dog running around in pit lane.
No.
But we're working with the organisers. We had that dog permitted to be within the working areas of the paddock, which was, just unheard of. So we've sort of broke new ground both on and off the track within the motorsport arena.
And talking about the working areas of the paddock, are you allocated a garage, or are you just allocated a space? And from the space point of view, I mean, I've seen the setup. You take up an awful lot of real estate. Sometimes are you split between a garage and the outside sort of working area?
So at British Superbikes, the garages are allocated to the Superbike teams, and the support class paddock that we're in, the championships we compete in, form the outer paddock. So where you saw us at Brands Hatch, that's our normal setup at BSB. The Arctic race truck with the awning that comes off of it, and then the workshop truck and stuff. That's our normal setup. When we go club racing with NG Racing, then if the circuits that they go to have garages, then we bid like all the other competitors to get a garage, and generally we get a garage. There's an element of support from the club there that they know that the facility being so close to the track for our disabled riders is a benefit. At BSB, it is what it is. If you want a garage, you've got to be running a superbike.
So do you get allocated a garage for Murray? Or you just keep him with the rest
Murray
of the team?
hasn't been with us for a few years now.
All right.
He's had some personal challenges of his own, and he stopped riding a few years ago, and then he's come back on his own. He wanted to when he came back on his own, but he stopped again. Unfortunately, a few months ago, he actually had his race bike stolen. So that's put pay at the moment to where he is, which is just despicable when you understand what that meant to that individual and what it was doing. But unfortunately, that's the world we live in now. People don't have a lot of morals anymore, particularly in that space. But no, the vast majority of Murray's racing career, certainly with us, no, garages were not afforded us. 12 years in the BSB, we've never had a garage because we've never got to the point where we've been able to run a superbike.
So sponsorship then. How do you get your
Yep.
sponsorship? How much does it cost to run the team a year?
A lot of money. Motorsport's not a cheap sport. Bike racing is cheaper than car racing, considerably cheaper, but it's still not a cheap sport. We made a conscious decision when the organisation was formed back in 2012 that we didn't want to be there on a blank check from a big charity, all the gear, no idea sort of thing. So it's been built up year by year, slowly but surely. When we first started in 2012, we had a 3x3 pop-up awning, a generator, and a motorbike. And that first bike, actually, the first race bike, was Murray's road bike that he converted for track use. It wasn't until we moved into BSB in 2013 that we actually got our first sponsored bike. We've had bikes sponsored ever since by Laguna Motorcycles down in Kent, who've every time we've asked, supplied us with new bikes. So that's been a real help on that front. But so our funding comes in the same way that the mainstream teams do, through corporate sponsorship and through merchandise sales to the general public, through donations. As a registered community interest company, we're operating in that charitable space and regulated to a degree with respect to that. So it gives us that credibility from that space, but we've not really operated in the charitable funding space. Yes, we have a couple of grants that we've been afforded over the years from some organisations, Team Forces being one of the big ones that supports veteran sport. But the vast majority, I would say 95% of our funding comes from corporate sponsorship and merchandise sales to the general public. It's phenomenal how much the general public and bike racing fans want to support us. It's often commented on that you see more True Heroes Racing shirts and merchandise around the paddock of BSB than you do some of the superbike teams, which is phenomenal. And that helps. It really does help. Although we've consciously priced our merchandise with a small profit margin because it's about making people aware of the organisation. Because if someone becomes aware, they may know somebody who may benefit from getting involved with us. So that's a big part of what the merchandise sales are about is making and raising awareness of the organisation. But there is a profit margin that goes into it that helps to fund what the organisation does. But our average running costs, particularly at the size that we're at now, region of about £250,000 a year.
It's quite a bit. So if
Yeah.
somebody wants to get involved, if there's a veteran out there that's desperate to be involved some way in British Superbikes, how do they go about it?
So the best thing to do is just to Google True Heroes Racing. There's a huge amount of information on there, whether it's media reports, press reports, videos, or our website and social media sites ourselves. So they can see a bit more about what it's all about, see whether they may benefit from getting involved with it. And then on our website, there is actually a contact page, a message page. Just drop us a message into that. And someone from the organisation will come back and start a conversation.
And if somebody just wants to come along for just one of the races, for say the next race that you've got, how would they get an invite to come along?
So if they're an organiser or a member of a veteran organisation or something along that military organisation, then again, make contact to us through that contact page, and we'll do what we can. Obviously, we have a lot of existing links into veteran organisations, and the guest space that you guys came and spent some time in at Brands, it's there, but it's not huge. There is a limitation to the number of people we can host. and a cost attached to that. So, again, I'd love to be able to open up and invite as many people as I can along. But I can't physically do that from both a financial perspective and a logistics perspective. But we'll do our best to support as many organisations as we can. And obviously, travelling around the UK with the British Superbike Championships, we're able to visit organisations and support organisations all over the country. So we travel from Thruxton down in the southwest to Brands Hatch in the southeast to Alton Park up in the northwest, across to Cadwell Park and in the central area in Donington and places like that. So we travel the whole length and breadth of the UK. Unfortunately, we don't always get up to Scotland. There's a round up in Heale in Scotland. We'd love to go there every year, but it's another one of those where it's cost that limits what we can do. It's last time we did it, I was driving the Arctic for 10 hours, so you can imagine the amount of fuel that was needed just to get one truck there. And as you said, I've set up, there's 4 trucks that go, so the truck fuel bill alone, can be extortionate. And we're lucky in some respects that we have a transport company that sponsor us and provide fuel cards for some of the trucks, but there's still a cost involved in a lot of what we're trying to achieve just to get to a race meeting, let alone actually conducting the activities over the 4 days that we're there.
Yeah, absolutely. So if somebody wants us to sponsor the team again, would they go down that same route, contact and look at?
Again, so there's a particular page on our website about sponsorship, and it talks about the kind of things that you can get. So we have a little bit of a luxurious or unique position, I suppose. Unlike a mainstream motorsport team, we have all of those opportunities available from a brand marketing perspective, whether it's having your logo on the shirt like this, on the bikes, on the trucks, all of that type of stuff, as well as the fact that because we're in the charitable space, we're offering a corporate social responsibility opportunity for businesses as well. And unlike the charitable space, if you made a donation to a charity, you'd make a donation, send your check off, and very often don't hear or see what your support has enabled that charity to do. You might get a quarterly newsletter or something, but with us, because of the opportunity to come and actually view what your support has enabled us to do, we offer that unique opportunity as well. And that is one that a vast majority of our sponsors actually think is a really good idea. Again, you spent some time in our guest area, and it's not a separate awning miles away from the working paddock. It's the back half of our main awning. So you can see the garage firsthand. You can see and mix with the guys and girls involved in the organisation. And you see the camaraderie and the banter and that lifted positive mental attitude firsthand. And that's really unique from that perspective. So from a corporate perspective, you're able to get all of the usual brand marketing returns, as well as the corporate social responsibility, and firsthand see how you actually assist us with what we're able to achieve.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I can recommend sort of getting in touch and going along and seeing the setup. It is quite a setup.
Yeah, it's taken us 12 years to get there, but and the challenge is reining me back in. Lizette, my ops manager, that's her biggest challenge. Like we said earlier, I'm an institutionalised service person myself. Joined the Navy at 18, and I've known nothing else. I've learned about the corporate and the commercial world through Lizette, our ops manager, and she's involved because her husband Daniel is one of our beneficiaries, so she volunteers her time to help me run the organisation because she sees firsthand what her husband gets out of being involved. But she brings the commercial acumen to the organisation, and her biggest challenge is keeping me on the straight and narrow, reining me in from these crazy ideas about doing more and offering more, and reminding me that there's only a finite amount of money in the pot that limits unfortunately what we can do. But if I'd chosen a cheaper sport, ping pong, for instance, nothing against ping pong, I probably wouldn't have a list of people wanting to get involved like we do. It is unique. It is high adrenaline. There are a lot of similarities to military life. There's a number of videos out there where people have said, it is like being on the battlefield. It's all quiet and calm, and then all of a sudden, 5-minute whistle goes and it flash to bang, and the bikes are going out, and everything's controlled chaos.
Yeah.
And then it is that high adrenaline 20 minutes of racing, and that in itself, assimilates very closely to military service.
Which is all fantastic. Well, Phil, that has been really interesting. And I can just only wish you every success for the future.
Thanks.
And talking in the
Yeah, it's been
future, how do you see it?
Yeah, that's what we want. We see a future. There's still so much more that we can do. So much more we want to do. Like you've seen, our activities at the moment take place at the race circuits. That's great between April and October when the racing is every 2 weeks, and we see the sinusoidal wave of particularly the mental health piece that our beneficiaries get. When they come racing, it's respite from their challenges, their daily challenges. Whether they're in the BSB element of the team where they're supporting the riders out on track and seeing what goes on and forgetting about their daily challenges for 4 days when they're away. We feed them, we water them, we look after them, we clothe them. They want for nothing during those 4 days, and it means they can completely shut out normal life for 4 days. But also their families get that respite, knowing that they're going to be looked after. That they're not in the middle of a field sleeping under the stars, eating a rat pack anymore. They're properly 3 square meals a day. Well, I'm a Matlow. I'm used to proper food, and I've spent 20 years working the RAF, so we're actually slumming it when we sleep on proper beds in the truck, not in 5-star hotels. But such is life. But their families get that respite because the challenges that our veterans suffer with on a daily basis, their families suffer those same challenges every day. So to know that their loved one is away for 4 days and being looked after, and they have 4 days to take a deep breath and reset before that individual
Yeah.
comes back, is respite for them as much. But it also means that they'll come back on a Sunday night, generally on a bit of a high because they've had 4 good days away racing with the lads and the banter and everything. And as that sinusoidal wave starts to climb and go over the peak and come back down, they start to look forward to the next event, and it smooths that curve. We can't prevent it because a number of my beneficiaries will say to me on a Tuesday or a Wednesday after a race meeting they feel really down because they've had such a great time, and then they've had to come away from it. But that downward slope is slowed and the bottom is smoothed out a bit because it's only 10 days later they're going away again. The challenge comes over the winter when racing stops.
Yeah.
What we
I
are
mean, do you
missing at the
do any
moment
winter
is
testing?
we try to, but funds that. But the challenge we have is we're missing at the moment is a permanent facility. All of our activities are transient. We take place at the race meetings all over the country, but between race meetings, we don't have a facility. The aspiration of mine is to have a workshop facility that has accommodation. So, like the events that take place at the race circuits over the winter, we can continue to do that with workshops. People can come away for a couple of days and spend a few days in the workshop tinkering with the bikes over the winter, sorting out kit, and just generally being back amongst that like-minded community, and sharing their challenges when they feel comfortable too, in that environment. We don't run any kind of clinical program. It's often referred to as peer group therapy, very much like
Yeah.
the biker club that you're a member of. You go out, you have a shared interest,
Yeah.
and people open up about their challenges to who they want to, when they want to. They're not sat on a couch being asked to answer questions for an hour. It's that kind of environment. So, one of the key things that we do is we all sit down and have dinner together in the evenings, no matter how busy the day's been and where people have been bouncing around. When dinner is served, everyone sits down and has dinner together, and that's that community. And that's when it sort of sets the scene for that evening, and people start to relax, and then people will talk about and share their challenges, whether that's just talking about how they've overcome a particular physical issue, whether they've got overcome a challenge with the system, the support elements, the NHS, etc., or whether it's actually opening up about some of their history and what causes them to have the challenges they have. There's no set routine, there's no set rules. They just talk when they feel they're comfortable to talk, or they don't talk about any of that. But they're able to just engage with a like-minded group of people with a shared interest.
So you were saying a bit about you're looking for a base for a winter for the winter projects to sort of maintain the bikes, etc., etc., etc. Where ideally would you like that located, or does it not matter? You'll just travel to it, and
Um,
if you could find a base where you could do it, where ideally would you like?
the best location would be to try and centrally locate within the UK. I live in Lincoln myself, and I used to live down in the southwest, and travelling from there to the race meetings was a challenge. Being in Lincoln, being central now is a lot easier. So it's opened my eyes to the fact that centrally basing something works better for all of the points of the country, and it kind of explains why Silverstone is a hub for motorsport in the UK. But
Yeah,
somewhere within the Lincolnshire area would be ideal because it's close to where we have a lot of our logistics set up at the moment. I've got trucks that I park at REF Waddington,
yeah,
trucks that we've parked at Stamford Hall over in Loughborough, and that central geographical location kind of works. But ultimately, it's being somewhere where it can be accessible, and the Midlands kind of works from that perspective. It offers more accessibility to the whole of the country. So that would be, the ideal solution, somewhere close by, so we can manage that facility. It's not a facility that's only opened up once a month. It's somewhere that we need
yeah,
to be able to access routinely. So it needs to be close to someone within the organisation, ideally, but then enables us to open it up for those workshops, those trips away, sort of thing. And
yeah.
so from
So
that perspective, Lincolnshire would be the
yeah,
gold-plated solution.
so ideally it needs to be a workshop area that can accommodate as well
Yeah,
for sleeping and feeding,
exactly. Yeah,
and have a
there
resting
are some.
area.
Yeah, there are some building regulation challenges. Having a workshop with people sleeping above it, but that's the sort of aspiration, is to have a workshop base type facility, but also to have accommodation and facilities, so that, like we do when we go racing, we can do the same sort of activity. So it's a 4-day respite break. It's just not
Mm,
at a race circuit sleeping in a truck. It's at a facility with a workshop, and there's sleeping accommodation, catering accommodation, so we're self-contained to be able to look after whoever it is that comes for those couple of days. So it provides that exact same respite type activity and trip, but it's in a central hard base rather than a mobile sort of setup in a race
yeah.
paddock.
So ideally something like an old TA unit base would suit the
Yeah,
needs.
anything we can make use of. Ideally, a bit of space to be able to park the trucks. But yeah, something like that. It's the workshop facility. Everything's achievable once there's a building that you've got
Yeah,
the option to modify. It's getting that sort of space. Even if it's um, two barns. One could be the workshop, one could be the living quarters, but they're
yeah,
co-located in the same sort of vicinity. So not necessarily directly above. And as I say, the building
yeah,
regulations, I would imagine, would have some real challenges with a workshop and petrol and stuff, and then people sleeping directly above it. But then people sleep above their garages in their houses, don't they? It's
yeah,
inbuilt garages now are commonplace, but there's challenges. But that's the aspiration, to have a workshop and accommodation facility that can operate as a facility to provide beneficiary opportunities, both over the winter period and even between the racing. There's a
Yeah.
big break in June because of the Isle of Man TT.
Yeah.
So there's a 6-week break in UK track racing. And that's another bit of a challenge. It's only 6 weeks, but it's still a period. We've got a few race meetings under our belt that year, and people are on that high, and then there's a 6-week
Yeah.
break before we go racing again. So we've over the years we've done some social activities over the winter. Get everyone together for a Christmas party. Go to Motorcycle Live, the big show at the NEC, and
Yeah.
we've exhibited there the last couple of years, and that's obviously a 10-day show. So in November we've got something going on, and hopefully we'll be back there again this year. December there's a Christmas party, and then before you know it, you're into January. So we're trying
Yeah.
to smooth out that winter period, but to have that workshop facility would both benefit what we're doing already, but also enhance the opportunities we're able to offer over the winter.
Yeah. And obviously train up guys to know the
Yeah,
bikes and all the everything else that goes around it.
yeah.
Fantastic. Well, Phil, I can only wish you every success, and if we can get you some new sponsors, if we can get you some premises, etc., off the back of this, it would be terrific.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you asking me to come on the show, and hopefully someone out there will hear your podcast and think, do you know what, that might be the organisation that can help me, or I know so and so who might be able to get involved and benefit from that. So that's
Yeah.
obviously the primary thing for me is making awareness, a bit like what I said earlier about merchandise. It's about increasing brand awareness because someone out there might not know about us and might benefit. There's
Yeah.
always challenges in the space that we're operating in with respect to getting awareness. We've been around, as I say, since 2012, but it's amazing the number of people outside of the racing community that don't know about what we do.
Yeah.
So anything we can do to raise awareness is great. And as you say, if there's anybody out there from a corporate perspective that thinks linking their brand with us might be beneficial for them and will obviously be beneficial for us and the people we support, then I implore them to get in touch. There's a little video we've got. I think we're going to show it as part of this
Yeah.
podcast that gives you a visualization of what we're all about and just shows you a little insight into some of the individuals that we were able to help.
Brilliant. Well, Phil, thank you so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
Well, there you go. What a terrific, terrific thing that is. True Heroes Racing. If you want to get involved with it, if you can help with sponsorship, if you can help with looking for a new building where they can set up for the winter period, or a permanent base in the Midlands where they can train people up, get people involved, then get in touch. The details will be in the description. So until the next one, thank you so much for your time, and absolutely great season for True Heroes Racing. So until the next one, TTFN, ta-da for now.